design events this fall, we started hearing questions from you all about taking a non-traditional path to design. So that means we were hearing from folks who learned design in bootcamp programs, or who were self-taught, or who were pivoting to design from another career. Y'all asked so many really good, specific questions that we literally had to make a whole session out of it. And that's why we're here today. So you're going to hear from designers who came to design from a non-traditional path. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what we mean about that. They are eager to share their experiences and some hot takes with you along the way. And I would give you a little bit of tease about who these designers are, but I just would not do their stories justice. But before we kick off officially, a few notes of housekeeping. First, let's keep in mind that this session will be recorded and shared with all of you who RSVP'd after the event. So don't worry, definitely going to be recording. Second thing, please use the Q&A section to add your questions. Me and my team will be gathering those throughout, and we'll spend the last 10 to 15 minutes of our session together getting you answers. Okay, third, please set your chat to everyone to make sure we all get to hear your voices. Feel free to chat throughout the sessions. Our panelists want to hear from you. And just consider this an open conversation we want you to be a part of. And lastly, please be kind to one another and follow our Figma community guidelines. One thing I want to flag after yesterday, we would love to connect with y'all, but please do not share your LinkedIn profiles in the chat. It's distracting from the conversation, but we are happy to hear your thoughts. Okay, I think that's about it. So without further ado, I'll pass the mic to my teammate Sound from the Figma product design team, who will be leading our conversation today. So Sound, over to you.
Hey folks, thanks so much, Alex. Welcome to this panel discussion on non-traditional paths, to design. I'm Soundarya, a product designer at Figma. I made a pivot from engineering to design 6 years ago, but it's one of the best decisions I've made. So obviously this topic is really close to my heart, and I'm super excited to talk to designers, these 5 designers with some amazing stories. I wanted to touch upon the idea of non-traditional before we start with introductions. It's quite a broad theme, but I just want to let y'all know that if you're a designer who has, an unrelated academic experience, if you've switched careers and you moved to a career in design, or even if you had to pick up most of your skills at your job, this discussion is for you. And we really hope you have something to take back at the end of this. And so, let's get started with some introductions. I'm going to pass the mic to Amy. So please introduce yourself. Definitely include where you work and what kind of design you do, and maybe one fun thing you like to do outside of work.
Totally. Hi, everyone. I'm Amy Lima. I am currently a product designer at an app called AMP. It's a live radio DJ app by Amazon Music. It's really fun, funky, fresh. What kind of design I do? I like to say just end-to-end product design. So both UX and UI with a focus on native mobile applications, and more specific still in the spaces of community and social expressions. So that's kind of the niche I've been kind of vibing in so far. And one fun thing I like to do outside of work is powerlifting. So I'm an amateur competitive powerlifter. Have done a few meets and stuff. And that takes up quite a bit of my free time, but love doing that.
Nice.
Yeah, it's a bit of...
Sandy, would you like to go next?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Sandy. I'm really, really excited to be here. Where I work, so currently I am a UX designer at MedSembly. I have freelance there full time, and MedSembly is like a very, very small startup that's focused on like healthcare education, and there's like a focus on mentorship. So it's very early stage. I kind of do a little bit of everything. I'm the only designer there, just kind of like focused on making the product grow and like trying to find its like niche in the current market. And then one fun thing I like to do outside of work. So I like to play a lot of volleyball. So I play volleyball, and then I also coach a lot of volleyball. And yeah, that's something that I like to do outside of work. And then I'll pass it on to Erica.
Hey folks, I'm Erica. I'm based in LA. I'm your rare bird. I'm a native Angelino, so shout out to all the LA folks here. I'm a product design apprentice at Tatari. Tatari is a TV advertising company, and I'm in a team of 4. And right now we're really focused on creating better experiences for businesses to buy TV advertising. I want to say another piece to my design. I'm really focused on sustainability and low carbon design. I don't know if I can pick one thing that I'm interested in outside of work. I'm equally obsessed with monarch butterflies right now because it's springtime, but also UFC. So I'll let y'all chew on those 2 opposite things, and I'll pass it on to Michael.
Thanks very much. Hi, everyone. My name is Michael. I am a junior product designer at a company called BridgeU. BridgeU is a sort of startup scale-up in the edtech or educational technology space. And they aim to match teenagers, 16, 17-year-olds with their perfect university course or college. And in terms of the sort of design that I do, I say similar to Amy and the rest, it's very much sort of product design. So it's equal parts UX and UI. Obviously, some of the projects are a bit more UX heavy and UI heavy, but generally I do sort of a nice mixture of the 2, which is a perfect match for me. And in terms of what I like to do outside of work, I really like to cook and bake. So I can often be found in the kitchen, whipping up or trying to whip something up to enjoy after work. And yeah, that's me. And I will pass over to Liz.
Thank you, Michael. Hi, everyone. My name is Liz Harder. I'm based out of Buffalo, New York. I currently work at M&T Bank. I actually just started a little under 2 weeks ago. So this is my first full-time product design role. It's on the treasury team, so it's in commercial banking. Quite frankly, I'm still trying to wrap my head around what I'll be doing. I do come from a more strong visual design background, I would say. That's how I made the pivot. One fun thing I like to do outside of work, I have a border collie dog, so we're always doing tricks. He just learned to ride a skateboard in his dog daycare, so we do a lot of fun things. And I will pass it back to Sound.
Oh my God, thank you. That was super smooth. So yeah, now that introductions are done, let's maybe dig a little deeper. I'd love to hear from all of you how your path into design looked like. And for this, maybe I'll popcorn to Erica to kick us off.
Oof. All right. I'm so excited to hear everyone's path. Mine is, I've got about 10 years of work experience. In all those roles, it's been very supportive and people operations. And the common thread for me is like my interest in human behavior. I'm really interested about hearing people's stories. I come to those roles with trying to figure out how I can support people that I'm working with and for. And so my path to design, I'm not going to go through the whole 10 years. I'll fast forward to when I had a deposit down at a UX bootcamp, but then I get this opportunity to work with this fast growing startup. And so I take my deposit back from that bootcamp. I joined the startup. Spoiler, the startup is Tatari. I wear all the hats under people operations. So HR, benefits, payrolls, event planning, culture building, all that. Fast forward 4 years later, the company grows from 30 to 250 people. And I am burnt out. I no longer see myself going down this path for people operations. So what do? I start having conversations with my friends and my colleagues, and I decide to take this leap of faith, quit my job at this startup that's growing, it's successful, and I go back to a UX boot camp. While I'm going through the boot camp, I maintain relationships with the design team at Datari. I use them as a resource to get feedback. And now, a year later, I'm an apprentice at Datari, and I love that I did these two very different roles for the same company. So that's my path. I'd love to hear Liz's.
Thank you, Erica. That's an exciting journey. Similar to, I won't go like way far back. I'll just say that I got a degree in communication studies, moved to New York, was kind of optimistic about finding a job, and found my way into the food industry, hospitality, kind of at first out of need, but stayed there because I was able to do some other creative freelancing projects at the time, like event photography. Both of those things came to a very abrupt halt with the start of the pandemic. And I suddenly found myself with so much downtime. I didn't even know what to do with myself. I was aiming to redesign my personal photography website and kind of had my light bulb moment. And I had a few friends that had creative small businesses that needed branding, logo, website. And honestly, they really took a leap of faith in me to help them and creatively collaborate. So my start into design was through freelancing, just doing independent projects. And about towards the end of 2021, I started to get a lot more interested in the product space and try to make that pivot from more visual design into UX. Considered a boot camp, but just kind of wasn't possible financially at the time, and started doing some independent projects with a friend who was also trying to get into UX writing. So yeah, it's been quite a long journey, very heavy in visual design, but also in freelancing. And I'll pass it to Michael.
Thanks very much. So for me, yeah, my path into design was a pretty wacky one. I graduated from university many years ago with a degree in archaeology, then went into teaching English as a foreign language for 3 years, and then the travel industry for 5 years, mainly in sales. But I got put on furlough March 2021, and then laid off 6 months later during the sort of the height of COVID. And yeah, a couple of months later, when I was still sort of figuring out what I wanted to do, I came across an advert on Instagram actually for UX design, and it sounded like amazing to me. It sounded like the stars were aligning when they were mentioning, you know, creativity, analytical mindset, soft skills are valued. I thought it sounded too good to be true, to be honest. But I gave this bootcamp my email address, and the marketing emails arrived, started reading them, thought this still sounds amazing. So let me do some research. And yeah, I spoke to a lot of recruiters, hiring managers, people in the industry to figure out, look, is this feasible? What's required, to make that successful transition? What soft skills are needed? And yeah, I loved everything I heard. So weighed up a number of different boot camps against each other before enrolling with one. And yeah, I've never looked back, really. Absolutely loved it. No regrets. And Amy, how about you?
I love all these stories. This is so great. For me, how did I get into design, my path into design? So similar to other panelists, I've, always been multidisciplinary in my pursuits, I would like to say. So I applied to universities as an English and literature major. I also wanted to study science and biology. I ended up studying economics and entertainment business. Thereafter, I started working in the music industry. So, kind of a little bit all over the place, but there were always some common threads there. Namely, I loved just creation and being close to that. And that's how I found myself in the music industry. I really loved being close to art and artists and just that sort of creative space. And I noticed that I was really good at communicating different wants and needs across very different kind of user segments, right? Or groups of people. And that was always something that was kind of highlighted to me. It's like, oh, you can equally talk to artists and their fans and, be in these business meetings. And, that was an asset of mine. And I kind of just loved being part of creating something from scratch, namely live events and managing artists directly, but was just looking for a change. I loved doing like manual work with my hands and stuff, but I wanted to create something more impactful at scale. And I've always been interested in design and technology, always been very online, always an early adopter of apps and kind of compulsively just trying out new platforms and, products that would be launched. But it was just kind of a quiet obsession of mine, really, nothing that I ever vocalized. And it was really during the pandemic, which was, that came at a time where I was already looking for a career change, that I started exploring this idea of UX design. I heard about it, very shortly before the pandemic. And interestingly enough, it was a text message from a friend also during that time. She ended up taking a coding boot camp. She's my friend from Ireland, from the other side of the globe. And she messaged me just out of the blue one day when I was already thinking about, quietly considering pursuing UX design or exploring it. And she just wrote to me like, hey, have you heard of this field? I actually think you would be really good at it. And it was that little crumb of, maybe it was validation or maybe a little bit of encouragement of like, hey, like, I see you, I see this in you. And I just took that and ran with it. So then I started exploring boot camps. I didn't even know that there were so many boot camps out there. I didn't even know that there were accessible paths to learning design. I always assumed, oh yeah, I didn't go to art school. I'm not a traditional artist. This can't be for me. And I swear, I mean, I've actually like never shared this, but when I started researching, all the boot camps and all these articles and just like bits of information available online, resources of like, oh, you can be a career changer. This is a skill that you can learn. And, folks from these non-traditional backgrounds can lend exceptionally well to this sort of field. I like didn't sleep for days. I was like in a manic frenzy, just like reading as much as I can about this field. And, it was one of those things that very cheesy, but it really felt like a missing puzzle piece for me of like, oh, my brain already works in this way. I can't even believe that there's, a career out there that seems like such a perfect fit. I really think I can do this. So that's why, I ended up taking a boot camp, going all in on it. And the rest is kind of a whirlwind history, but that's a bit of how I got here. How about you, Sandy?
Thanks for sharing all that, Amy. It's been really great hearing everyone else and how they got into design. So like everyone else, I graduated with a degree and I had prior experience in like another field. So I graduated with a degree in art, actually in painting and drawing. And then I became an art teacher. So I was an art teacher for 8 years before I transitioned over into UX design. And I actually graduated from my boot camp this year, like pretty recently. I graduated from a boot camp in October of this year. So very early on in my transition. And I kind of got into UX design through education. My interest in it first started during the pandemic. So I was an art teacher and I knew I wanted to make a career transition, but I just didn't know what career I would go into because like what I was doing as a teacher was very fulfilling, but it was also very, very stressful and you just don't get paid a lot. So I just was like, okay, I guess I'll just keep doing this until I figure out like what I want to do. And then COVID happened and everything moved online. And that's when I really started seeing like what kind of technology products were out there. And there was also a lot of problems that teaching virtually caused for like my students, like a lot of processes that just didn't work out really well and products that really didn't work for like teaching art online. And that's kind of how I found UX. Like I was just Googling like how can I make this product better? Like, is there a feature on this product that will like make teaching art online easier? Like I just Googling stuff. And then that's kind of how I found UX design. And then that's when I was like, oh, like there's a person who like is actually in charge of like making these things like easier to use for people or like making these experiences and these processes better. I was like, I think this might be what I want to do in the future. So that was in like 2021, like the end of 2021 and 2022. So like that whole school year, I was just kind of like YouTubing things, like just kind of learning more about UX design and just kind of like seeing if this is something I want to get into. And then at the end of the school year, so June of 2022, that's when I was like, okay, I'm gonna like take the leap of faith. I think this is what I want to do, because studying part-time and teaching was really, really difficult. And I was like, I don't think I'm ever gonna make the full switch if I just don't like do it right now, like just quit and just like make the switch. So quit teaching in June of 2022, enrolled in a full-time boot camp, and I finished that in October of 2022. And I actually enrolled in another boot camp that was part-time. So I was like freelancing part-time while doing this other boot camp, because I recognized there was like gaps in my knowledge that you just really can't fill with like 3 months of education, like boot camp education. And then I finished that boot camp in February 2023. And then I just like started freelancing full-time. And then I'm doing an internship for the New York Times this summer, and just kind of like continuing my journey into UX design.
Yeah. Oh, thanks, Sandy. Sorry, were you going to say something else?
No, I was just going to pass it on to the next person.
Okay. I just think listening to all of you, something about this feels like a Hallmark movie. It's just so wholesome, just hearing all your like, oh, I was really confused, but now I'm really happy and this is my thing. It's just, yeah, it's just so wholesome. And so it's just so nice to listen to it. But I do want to say that I'm just really mind blown to see all these pivots from like hospitality. I think, Michael, you said you got a degree in archaeology, HR, and even education. And so, Sandy, the thing that I'm really curious about is, how has your 9 to 5 changed?
Yeah. So it's very, very different like than what I used to do as a teacher, because when you're a teacher, like a lot of your day is already decided for you. Like you have to teach class like 80% of the day. And then the 20% is like what you have for planning. So like my day would start at like 6:30 a.m. So like school usually starts at like 7. And then I wouldn't get done until like 6:30 p.m. because like after the students leave, you have to like plan for the next day, and like you have to have meetings, like parent calls, things like that. And then most teachers that I know had to work another job because you don't really get paid that much as a teacher. So like I would always have to do stuff after school. Like I coach volleyball, or like I would do like after school activities and things like that. So like my schedule was a lot more rigid. And like the most important part of it was the teaching, but then you'd have to like add in all like extra like stuff outside of that. Like I'd have to take work home a lot, because there's just no way you can get like everything done in like an hour and a half that they give you, because the rest of the day is like you are in front of kids. Like you don't have time to like plan or like do any of this stuff. Like you have to talk and like be on your feet and just like be making sure everyone's engaged for like 6 hours of the day. So it's very, very different than what I do now. So like now, like with my freelancing, my schedule is a lot more flexible, and I don't really have like a set hours that I have to work. Especially because where I freelance, like not everyone's in the same time zone. So I also have to like sometimes have to take meetings really late at night, just because that's when the other people are online. I kind of just like set my own schedule, and like I'll like bring up like certain things that I have to do. Like a lot of my day is like I do a lot of like testing the product, like seeing what problems there are, like making design changes, like working with developers to implement those changes. So I really kind of like set my schedule, whereas like that wasn't really the case when I was a teacher. Like you have your schedule, and then you just figure out how to make it work like outside of the times that you have to teach.
Yeah. No, I totally hear you. I think there's something about being a designer where you like can't stop thinking about work. But at the same time, it's also really fulfilling. But there is a ton of freedom where you can decide, when to pick up work and when to, maybe sometimes take a chill pill. But yeah, now I'd be really curious to kind of zoom into this like transition part. And so my question is for Michael. What did you do to position yourself for success? And what was kind of an important mindset to have as you were transitioning into a designer role?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So pretty early on in my studies, I had the opportunity when my boot camp which was Design Lab. We had the opportunity when submitting our own work to see our fellow students' own submissions as well. And I realized fairly quickly that there were some students there who'd clearly transitioned into a UX design bootcamp from after a bit of research from careers like graphic design. And as a consequence, those students, I realized, already had many of these the UI design fundamentals laid down. And as a consequence, their visuals just looked a level up from where mine were, because I'd never done any kind of visual or design work in my life. So I realized, after speaking to recruiters, when I thought, is UX right for me? Is this, can I do this? A lot of them, and hiring managers as well, were saying that, product design is not just pretty UI design. It's that's only part of it. And that's, at the very end of the process, there's a lot that goes into it on the UX side as well, a huge amount. Let's be clear there. But at the same time, hiring managers were saying that, you need to have a good 50-50 blend in their experience to get to the interview stage and things like that. And so I thought, well, okay, alongside my studies, let's work on UI design. So I networked quite a bit, thought about how can I kind of level up my skills alongside my studies. And one thing I did was extra copy work. So what I would do is I would take screenshots of some of my favorite apps, mobile, desktop, or marketing websites, homepages that had won awards or people were raving about, chucked them into Figma, and just did like for like copies to not just like a robot, but at the same time thinking and analyzing, let's think about this designer's use of color, typography, font weight, alignment, white space, which is super, super important. Why have they made the decisions they made? And I think me kind of crafting that analytical eye really helps to level up my UI skills. I think as well, I did some daily UI challenges. So you get an email a day from a different provider saying, oh, today you're going to design a login screen for, I don't know, like a charity app or something like that. So it was just fun, different things, just one screen things. But I would get some inspiration off the web, think and put something together in Figma. And doing this day after day was really helpful for me. I would also try and level up my skills just in Figma in general. Auto layout, it's for me, I love it. It's a massive time saver. And I decided to take some time alongside my bootcamp to really learn the fundamentals of it. And this was massively helpful for me because it allowed me to iterate at speed on my work during my bootcamp, but is also something I feel I've been able to apply really well in my current role. And so I'm really happy that the investment I put into leveling, increasing my UI skills to complement the UX side, which I think I was much heavier on, and my soft skills from travel and teaching were to, I think that the time I put in really helped to bring my UX and UI from here to here, and help me make that successful transition.
Yeah, no, I think that's such a great tip, emulating what already exists outside, like taking a screenshot of a website and just like trying to recreate that. That just feels like such a basic exercise, but so powerful as you start doing it more and more. And yeah, I also I was watching you, Liz, I felt like you really related to what Michael was saying. So I'd really like to hear your perspective as well. What kind of mindset do you think is really important as you move to a new career, especially in design?
Yeah, Michael, thank you for that. So I think trying to connect the dots, it kind of relates to what Michael was saying with the soft skill of your in real life, a non-design experience. It could be as well. Sometimes freelancing is viewed a little differently, or a graphic design. For instance, my hospitality experience, I think in pretty much every interview I've had, I really tried to paint a visual of why that's important to the recruiter. Kind of just drawing parallels, explaining how the customer is kind of like the user and interacting with bartenders or hosts or managers, or even back of house is kind of like working with different teams. And really just drawing that connection of not only your portfolio work, but the other parts of you and how it relates to how you would work in that job. And then something else, like I think most of the folks here did end up doing a boot camp, and it's a super great way to go about it. I think for folks that possibly are thinking that it's too big of an investment currently, or it's just not possible, that was kind of the position that I was in, and kind of just took upon myself to try to emulate some case studies on my own, kind of do some independent work similar to Michael practicing with those screenshots of the websites. So it is a path that requires a lot of dedication, a lot of like YouTube. In my case, I worked specifically with a friend who's trying to get into UX writing and now works at Spotify. And we kind of held each other as accountability partners, and did both real work for a website, but also kind of invented a project for an existing product. This could be like a workaround if having a really set path on a boot camp kind of just isn't an option.
Yeah, and I think the part where you talked about like using real life experiences and try to emulate a case study, I think that's the kind of stuff that you carry into your job as well. Like competitive research is such an important part of design. So it's not something that you have to pick up just until you like get a career in design. It's something that like continues with you for a long time. But yeah, I'm also curious about your take, Amy. What do you think is a very important mindset to have, and how did you set up yourself for success?
Yeah, I really love this question. Yeah, it's interesting. Okay, yeah, being like perfectly candid and vulnerable, I'll be real and say that still at times, right? I'm definitely feel a bit of insecurity over, kind of changing careers and coming from this like non-traditional path, seeing exceptional designers, peers, and I'm kind of like learning still by brute force, right? Learning to like fly the plane when I'm already in the air. It's tough, right? But a position that I adopted very early on, that was honestly more so just for like self-preservation and to quell some of that self-doubt, was to kind of embrace my background, right? So instead of kind of hiding behind it or feeling a bit embarrassed or less than, or trying to kind of make myself out to be like a traditional designer who comes from this more experienced background, I just kind of put it all out in the open, right? I'm like, hey, this is where I'm at, this is where I came from, and actually this is why it's an asset rather than a liability, right? Like it's precisely for this reason that I'm super valuable, right? And genuinely, now I believe it with my whole chest even more. But once I started kind of telling myself that, and there's a lesson there as well, right? And just kind of like positive self-talk and, kind of speaking it into existence, not to get all woo-woo, but like truly, once you start like speaking in from a place of confidence, you start to believe it, right? And then like I genuinely started to believe it. And I'm like, wait a minute, actually, yeah, like I do got it. Like my brain already works this way. That much I knew and was super sure of. I have a lot of these transferable skills, also facts. I super believed that at the time as well. And here's what I've done. Yeah, maybe it wasn't in the realm of, traditional software design, but I do have really sharp, critical thinking skills, creative problem solving skills, managing and owning projects from end to end. I'm resourceful. I come from a family of immigrants, right? My parents are immigrants. I'm a first generation American. That greatly influences how I approach my work and my life and my work ethic and kind of what I bring to the table. So rather than, seeing it as kind of like a vulnerability or, oh no, I kind of need to like hide behind this, I kind of reclaimed the narrative, put it all out in the forefront and celebrated it. And genuinely, wasn't even like a ploy or anything. It's just something that, the more I thought about it, the more I was like, you know what, I do want to step into this place, this new space from a place of authenticity. This is who I am, this is what I bring to the table. And I hope, an employer sees that as as much of a valuable thing as I do. So that was kind of, my approach to positioning myself as a designer, as a professional. It really just yeah, comes from a place of authenticity and celebration, really.
Yeah, no, I love that. I totally agree. And I think I recently read this somewhere where it's like, it's okay to doubt your work. It's totally okay, but don't doubt yourself. And it's kind of along those lines. And I do think this is like the perfect segue for the next question, which is, what was like most challenging about taking this non-traditional path into design? And for this, I'd love to hear your thoughts, Erica.
Oh man, I love that quote about not doubting your work. And you can doubt your work, but don't doubt yourself. Yeah, let me write that down. Okay, what's challenging? It's still challenging, y'all. I think I'm early on in my transition, similar to Sandy. I graduated my boot camp fall of last year. And so it's like you're learning a new language, right? And once you kind of get the terminology down, you like have to continue building your muscles. So you really have to actively be practicing new methodologies, new mindset. And I think when you're trying something new, and particularly in design, you're not going to get it right the first time. You might not get it right the second or the third either. So you have to get comfortable with that, with failing. I think it's also important to acknowledge where there might be some gaps as well. So you can say, okay, I still need to learn here, and you can continue down your path. I think also, like, we're not always equipped to have these spaces that like foster learning and be willing to make mistakes. So, whether it's the space internally in your head, hello, imposter syndrome, or in your environment, I think you have to be kind to yourself and be patient. It's definitely a uphill battle, but I made the decision to do that. So Sandy, I know we're in similar places. I'd be curious to know what's challenging for you.
Yeah. I feel like there's two main challenges when I was taking the path into design. One, I was quite surprised with the number of people who just didn't value my experience from my previous career. Like, they just didn't see any correlation between going into education and going into design. And I constantly had to like advocate for myself and explain how my previous experience like relates. And it also helps like if you do like projects, like when I was a teacher, like trying to see, oh, how can I apply like some of these UX design skills like while I'm still a teacher to what I'm doing now. But there's just a lot of that, like people just not thinking that my previous experience really mattered. And I think that's important to like work somewhere where they do like value that experience. Like you'll or find that community that does value like that previous experience. Because like from my standpoint, I feel like teachers are like superhumans, and I was just like I think teachers can do anything. Like if you can get like a room full of like 40 kids to listen to you and do exactly what you say and get everyone to get along, then you can do a lot. And a lot of people just didn't really value that. So yeah, like advocating for myself. And then another big challenge transitioning was also just you do feel alone sometimes. Like it gets really, really difficult. Like you feel like you're alone. And it feels really, really competitive. So it's like important to find that community of people who are like in your corner, like cheering you on, and like who also believe in you, because it does get kind of hard like when you're by yourself and you don't really have like me constantly just advocating for myself can get hard sometimes. So it's important to find that like community of people around you, whether they're like mentors like off like ADP lists, or like just like other people in UX design that are like in your circle. I've been able to find that, and that really helps a lot.
Yeah. I know you touched upon the imposter syndrome, which I do want to talk about in a bit, but I'm curious to hear your experience as well, Liz.
Yeah, I was just gonna plus one everything Sandy said. My point was about like it kind of only comes through trial and error, which stinks to say, but just through doing each interview, interaction, just networking, you'll kind of come to better realize and see and look for the green flag, so to speak, of like, you know, mentors or companies or positions, even in how the job posting is written, that value a diverse background or being self-taught. I think that it's so important, and it just kind of comes with like being in the messy middle. And then the imposter syndrome totally on there. But yeah, I would say like really just leaning into finding companies and mentors that value that diverse background that you have.
Yeah, thanks, Liz. And I do think on the topic of imposter syndrome, I have it too. And I think there are two reasons. One, if you're self-taught, of course, you're going to feel like, oh, no learning is enough. And the second thing is design is a very subjective field. So it makes sense for us to have imposter syndrome. But I think for all of you listening, if you want to make posters to put up in your room, I did write down some notes as, you know, Erica, Liz, and Sandy were talking. 3 things to remember: design is a practice. You're never going to get it right the first time, and it's totally okay. Just keep trying. The second is advocate for yourself. And then the third thing is being self-taught is your superpower. And so let's move on to the last question. After that, we have an exciting Q&A session where we'll try and answer questions that we're getting in the chat. And so the last question is, let's, you know, kind of end it in a very positive, try to look at the bright side kind of way. So can you give us examples of your past experience empowering you? And for this, I'm going to pick Amy and Erica to answer.
Totally. So yeah, just thinking of my past experiences, well, you know, even beyond, even like precursor to my professional experience in the music industry, right? Like I mentioned, I've always been kind of multidisciplinary in the things I've studied and gotten involved with. And I like pairing very different disciplines together, right? Powerlifting and yoga, for example. Like I always try to put myself into challenging, creative, like just stimulating environments, learning something new. So that in and of itself, right, is a very transferable skill, or I guess like personality trait that directly correlates with having, you know, a growth mindset as a designer, being very curious, you know, investigating deeper beyond surface level of anything, from like a statement to a user problem to, you know, a new feature build. So that in and of itself is something I've noticed. That's, yeah, really empowering and fuels my work. More specifically, from my experience in the music industry, working in live events, I always had to have a 360 view of all of my projects and really think quick on my feet to solve very big problems, like in the blink of an eye. Like, oh, cool, everything went wrong, you know, pull a solution out of a hat. So also keeping your cool in those situations, right? Being kind of unfazed, right? Cool, calm, and collected when things are a bit chaotic. You know, I'm pretty good at that, and I bring that into my work. And kind of always look on the bright side, right? It's like there's always going to be a solution. Let's just take a minute to pause and see how we get ourselves through this moment. And more broadly, I also noticed that my work is heavily inspired and influenced by the physical world and context. So I very often think of IRL situations in which users will be engaging with the products I help design, because I use that same kind of contextual thinking when I was designing live events, right? So often I'm like, you know, thinking of like hierarchy and, you know, contrast, accessibility, or, you know, just how the actual interaction design of certain products. I'm like, wait, what's the context in which users are even going to be using this? Let's think about it. Maybe there's a different approach we can take with that in mind. So I noticed that I usually bring those kind of sound bites to the table, which is comes directly from my previous work. And yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really great. How about you, Erica?
I think like bringing in that lens of what your past experience is like the perfect way to combat imposter syndrome, because we're talking a lot about it, like just reframe it as your strength. And this is what I bring to the table. This is my lens. And I feel strongly about what Amy's saying about context. Like in HR, I was making a lot of different decisions that were like contributing to this like ecosystem of the company, you know. How am I communicating to the employees? What tools are we implementing? What systems are we implementing? And so I bring that systems thinking approach to my design. I'm not only thinking about like, what's the impact for that end user, but maybe the rest of their life, the community that they live in, and maybe even the planet too. So yeah, there's my my lens.
Yeah. And I think just listening to you talk to me feels really obvious. I'm like, oh, you worked in HR, you're probably really empathetic. Of course, you'd be a great designer, you know. But I understand like when you are in that role and you're making that decision, of course it's scary. But yeah, thank you so much, you guys. And now we'll move on to the Q&A section. I just took a peek at these questions. These are great. Let's get started maybe with the first one, which is how do you stay up to date on current tech and design trends? I don't have a specific person to call out for this question, so just unmute and start speaking.
I can sort of chime in with my 50 cents here. So how do I stay up to date? So I'm a part of quite a few different Slack communities. They've been massively helpful for me. They were, so aside from my bootcamp Slack community, obviously I joined when I enrolled. At the same time, I enrolled in you know, London-based design communities, international ones as well. And I did a lot of observation, to be honest. I saw what sort of real life problems designers at startups, scale-ups, corporate companies, what problems they're grappling with, what resources people are sharing, you know, what people are talking about, you know, kind of the rise of AI, a lot of that. I think, yeah, it's absolutely, you can contribute and, you know, weigh in with your thoughts and, you know, go into these communities to request feedback. But equally, I think there's a ton of knowledge in there that was massively helpful for me in sort of staying up to date with the latest design trends and things. I'd say that's, yeah, that was probably the biggest, yeah, the most helpful thing for me.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think that was great advice, especially trying to find a community, right? During these times is really important. And this is kind of related. The next question is how the job market is really competitive right now, which we all know about. So in your opinion, what would be the best way to get, you know, a foot in the door as a designer?
I have some thoughts on this. Because yeah, definitely the market is really competitive right now, but arguably it's been that way for a long time, right? And it's a bit of a spicy take, but I wouldn't necessarily say the market is oversaturated with just designers, right? It's oversaturated with just okay designers. So that means if you're just 5% better than the status quo, you're gonna stand out, right? Also not saying that the bar is quite low, but like that extra, I mean, it's true in like any like, you know, design project as well, right? That last 20% takes 80% of time and effort and like really, you know, fine-tuned skill and craft. So I would just challenge anyone to really double down on your actual craft, right? Like, you know, it seems kind of obvious, like a duh moment, but that was the mindset that I adopted of like, oh, if you've got the skills, if you're exceptional, not in like a perfectionist mindset, but just if you really put in the work and the hours, it's unglamorous. There aren't a lot of shortcuts. If you just really focus on being the best designer you can possibly be at the stage you're at, you're going to be valuable no matter what the market conditions are, right? So I would just invest in that. It's the approach I took. I saw returns to that investment of like, I'm just focusing on skill, be as great as I can possibly be, get 1% better every day. And then not to say the rest just falls into place, falls from the sky, right? You still have to put in active work, but that's, I think, a really safe and sustainable blueprint to follow. So yeah, I would work on skill and craft first, and then yeah, maybe even less, you wouldn't have to worry about the market as much in that case.
Yeah, I hard agree. I think focus on yourself, try to be the best version of yourself, figure out what makes you stand out, and just like put the 10,000 hours in, and you'll find yourself a job for sure.
Can I just chime in
yes.
really quickly, if that's okay?
No,
Yeah.
of course. Go ahead.
I think that's amazing advice, Amy. It's also something I wanted to say about soft skills. So I mentioned earlier on that if, like me, you're transitioning into design from a non-design career, your UI skills might be a little bit behind, and that's fine. That's absolutely fine. But I think what you need to do as well is take a really deep dive into your past, what previous careers you've done. Something I did learn early on is that I think soft skills are really valued in UX design. I think the right soft skills are truly valuable. And figuring out, once you do the research, figuring out, speak to product designers in the industry, what soft skills do they believe are highly applicable and very useful into their current role. What soft skills have you picked up in previous careers, and put them together? What are the soft skills that designers say are really useful? What have you picked up? Find that middle ground. And I would just say to market and sell those at every single opportunity. Cover letters, interviews, networking events, because they are your biggest assets, I would say, in addition to leveling up the rest of your skills. So that's what I did, and it was really helpful for me.
I can add on a little bit, sound there, to what Amy and Michael was saying, because companies are looking at our portfolio, right? Unfortunately, that's the process right now. And to think about like what to showcase on your portfolio, to dig deeper about what your interests are, what problems you want to solve, what kind of company you want to work for, and showcasing that on your portfolio. That's going to attract the company or the problems that you want to work on. Because I think portfolio building is very daunting.
Yeah. I think that was, I'm super happy that all three of you pitched in, because that's like a very well-rounded answer. Hopefully that's helpful to all of you who are listening. I'll move on to the next question really quickly. So for the boot campers, did you feel the need to supplement your learnings, to make yourself stand out? And if so, with what?
I can take this one. So I actually did supplement my learning, like my bootcamp learning, because my bootcamp focused more on like design thinking, like the design process, and maybe like some of the research methods and like different terms like UX methodologies you might come across, but it really didn't focus on design. And I know like visual design, and I know that like UX design is not visual design, but the thing is, people look at your portfolio and they're not like, they look at it at first glance, and you really need to make an impact like visually then, because like you need to communicate like what you did in like a really digestible way. So people really look at like the visuals too, like even though that's not what UX design is. So like one of my mentors, he told me like, you should take a visual design class because you're lacking in that. Like you have a lot of strong strength in these other areas, but people are going to look at your portfolio and then they're just going to be like, oh, this is off, like immediately no. So I did like supplement my boot camp with like, I took classes at SVA in New York, like design classes, and like, yeah, like more YouTube stuff, because I recognized that was just an area that I wasn't as good at. And like, even though I had all these other skills, like soft skills, like people were just not going to give me a chance if like my portfolio didn't match that.
Yeah. And if I can add to that too, I think even during my learning, I would see something that looked really good. I'm like, yo, I want to make that. And I try, and then it wouldn't look good. And then I literally YouTube that exact specific, like, how do I add a drop shadow? And like, that's how I learned so many important things in design, just by like YouTubing it. And so if you're doing that, don't feel bad. That's totally okay. I'm sure everybody in this room has done it. And it's a really good way to learn, and so I think we might have time for one more question, which is, how do you get started with a portfolio for your first job? This is a hard one, but yeah, any takers?
I can take this one, kind of how I got going. I think something that's really important is to try put yourself out there. And in kind of relating to, I think what Erica said with like taking on projects that genuinely interest you. So, aligning with folks that understand like where you're coming from, that you're learning. But it could be like for a nonprofit, it could be volunteer work, or it could just be a passion project where you see an existing brand or company that you really enjoy and you want to add to the experience. Just start. I think it can be quite overwhelming, like, oh, I need 3 case studies, I need 4 case studies. Just start doing something. And it will probably flow best if it's out of an area that you're already passionate about. And just keep creating is what I would say. I think getting started is the hardest part and can feel really overwhelming, but either like passion projects or volunteer work is a really good place to start.
Yeah. Again, that's such great advice. If I have to add one more thing to it, don't look at it as, oh, I have to create a portfolio. Just like pick something really easy to do, in the sense like, oh, I'm gonna write about this thing that I did. And then that's like a good start, and then start building up on top of it. You don't have to think about designing your portfolio and writing for your use case study and designing for it. That might feel really daunting, but maybe a simple step is to just break it down. I know that's pretty obvious, but I wish someone told that to me, because it took me a long time to get started. But yeah, I think we're out of time, but this is so good. Thank you, Erica, Sandy, Liz, Michael, and Amy. It was so great talking to all of you. But over to you, Alex.
Thank you so much, Sound, and thank you again to the panelists. I was over here getting goosebumps and just feeling so inspired by each of your stories. I feel like I'm walking away with so much from this panel, and I hope everyone else is too. Just giving y'all a quick plug for tomorrow's session. We touched on it briefly here where we started talking about portfolios, but this is only day 2 in our event series. Tomorrow is a conversation with some of Figma's early career product designers who are going to be talking about how to get hired and stand out in your process. We're going to be talking about portfolios. There are going to be some hot takes that I'm already hearing from the team, and talking through how to get noticed and how to build that early portfolio especially. So if you have the time, please join us tomorrow. We absolutely would be thrilled to have you. And let's just all throw another thank you in the chat for these panelists that volunteered their time today to connect. I know all of our panelists have also invited y'all to connect with them on LinkedIn after our session. So definitely grab a screenshot if you haven't, to get everyone's name so you know who to connect with. And just thanks y'all for coming, and hopefully we'll see you again tomorrow. Awesome. Okay, everybody, have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Very much.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.